Okay, it's 20 past, so I think we can start. So, first of all, I just want to say a massive welcome to everyone who's attending NDC Oslo. So, this is my fourth time speaking at NDC Oslo. So, obviously, it's a shame that I can't be there in person today, but we are where we are in the world at the moment. It's a great privilege to be here again speaking at this wonderful conference. So this talk is called Fighting Back Against a Distracted World, where we're going to talk about distraction. Now, when I originally drafted this talk, it was back in December last year, and the world was a completely different place back then. So I first presented this talk in NDC London back in January. The world was very different. So, we'll try and take some of that into account, but obviously hopefully everyone's going to start going back to normal fairly soon. I know countries in Europe are at various different stages of easing their lockdowns, as are we in the UK, but I think we're a bit behind the rest of Europe. But this is all going to be about how we deal with distraction and sort of be productive. So I want to start off with a quote here. So this is from a book, A Tale of Two Cities, written by Charles Dickens, and it starts off by saying, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, and it was the age of foolishness." And this opening sentence is just as relevant now as it was back then when this book was written. So we do live in the best of times from a technology standpoint. We have unbelievable technology. I mean, I'm sitting here in rural Derbyshire in the centre of England talking to a global audience at a conference using a webcam and a microphone, which is pretty amazing. It's also the worst of times because even though we have all this amazing technology, we have social media, so we're permanently connected with everyone around the world. We have Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, which is amazing, constantly streaming us information and, content that we can watch. It's the worst of times because there's so many things vying for our attention, which can make it really hard to be productive. So why do we care about this? So what I want to do is I want to talk a bit about my own sort of personal journey and some of the things I've had to overcome to do with sort of distraction and being productive. So this is a lot about personal experience, which I hope you can translate into your own lives as well. But this very much is not a I hate technology talk. That's not the purpose of this talk at all. Technology is fantastic. But I want to talk about how we can be less distracted by it so we can actually achieve more in our lives. So a little bit of context. So back in 2017, in July, I made the decision to quit my full-time job and sort of go solo working for myself. So for me, this meant I was creating Pluralsight courses full-time because that's what I predominantly do as income now. I do courses for Pluralsight. So one day I went into work, I handed my resignation into my boss and I worked my 1 month's notice. And at the end of July, I was free. I was working for myself. It's quite funny because at the time I had just recently turned 40. And whilst I've been planning making this move to leave my job for quite a while, obviously it's something me and my wife have been discussing for quite a while. A lot of my friends actually sort of got in touch with me and asked me if I was okay because I just turned 40 and then I quit my job. So they were wondering if I was having a midlife crisis, which was quite funny. But I wasn't having a midlife crisis. I just had things that I wanted to do with my life that didn't involve working for someone else. Because, like everyone else, I had a boss who, wanted me to do work for them. Now, I was very lucky in the last job I was in. I actually got on really well with my boss and the leaders of the company. But, I've worked for companies before, just like everyone else, where you might have a leader or a manager who maybe isn't quite as good as what you'd hope. And, I was kind of getting a bit sick of that. So I wanted to be my own boss. So at this point, I'd quit my job. I set up my office at home and I was living the high life. I was doing my own thing, working for myself. And it was fantastic. After about 9 months, I found myself, I was working in my house. I had my office set up in the dining room. Got a nice view of the garden to the right and some doors to my left, which lead into the lounge. So I had lots of nice natural light. It was a great working environment. After a while, I'd just take the laptop and then go and sit in the lounge on the sofa. And, just put something on TV, just something in the background. Maybe put the news on or just start watching something on Netflix. And before I realised it, I'd actually binge watched 10 seasons of Big Bang Theory. I was working at the same time. I wasn't just watching Big Bang Theory. I was doing stuff with this on in the background. I got to the end of the 10 seasons and I was like, what the hell am I doing? I've just sat here and watched over the space of a few months 10 seasons of something, which I thought was a bit crazy. And part of the problem is I was starting to have cabin fever set in. I was in the house constantly all the time. Now, obviously, as I said, when I wrote this talk, it was before we was in this current sort of lockdown situation. So, obviously all of us have been forced to be in our houses constantly, which does result in cabin fever quite a lot of the time. But before we had these strange times, I was starting to get a bit of cabin fever at home where I was actually resenting being in the house because I was living there. I've got a wife, I've got 2 children. So as well as living my life with my family, I was also working. And after a while, you start to find it difficult to separate those boundaries between work and home life. Well, I did certainly. Some people don't get affected by this so much. My wife has been a home worker for the last 16 years and she's never had a problem. She's never had cabin fever. But for me, I was finding it a real problem. So at that point, I thought, now's the time to actually get out of the house. So I rented a desk in a co-working space. This was my desk, probably the tidiest it had ever been on day one of working in a co-working space. This was fantastic. So I was still working for myself, but there was other like-minded people in the same room who were running their own businesses. So it kind of gave me some of that office vibe back. We had lots of office banter, which was fantastic. I kind of missed the office chit-chat. But there was none of the competing for jobs and stuff like that because everyone in the co-working space was doing their own thing. They're all freelancers. So no one was competing with each other, but we kind of had this office banter. And after a while, an opportunity for my own office came up in the same building, which is here. This is where I'm sitting now. So the black chair there on the left, that is indeed where I'm sitting at the moment. This is great because it meant I had a place that I could go and do my work. When I'm in this office, I am doing work. When I'm at home, I am at home and present for my wife and children. And this led me to do quite a bit of self-reflection on kind of what is the nature of work and our working environments and what it means, to be productive and to try and minimize distractions, which has kind of culminated on me putting this talk together. So some of the things I want to talk about are procrastination and distraction. I want to talk a bit about social media addiction because at one point I was heavily addicted to social media. Facebook was my particular poison in this case. I just spent far too much time on it. I want to talk a bit about self-motivation and kind of what motivation means. And then we're going to round out with some general productivity and time management tips, just small little things that maybe you're doing already or maybe you're not and could actually sort of help you in your day-to-day work. As I said before, this isn't I hate technology talk. That's not what this talk's about at all. So I love technology. I've been a professional software developer for over 25 years now. And I love sitting in front of this big slab of glass in front of me. Nothing brings me more joy than doing that. But these amazing machines are also vying for our attention, which can be a big problem. Now, I also don't want to come across as preaching to you or telling you what to do. So I have no right to tell you what to do, and I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about, my own personal journey, my personal story, and hopefully some of it you can take away and apply yourself, or some of it may not be relevant. It completely depends on the individual watching the talk. A lot of this comes from my own kind of personal experience and struggles of trying to be accountable for my own actions when it comes to being productive for my work. So first of all, let's talk about distraction, and more importantly, its evil brother, procrastination. Procrastination is something that can really cripple all of us in our work. Now, I used to be a chronic procrastinator. My wife actually used to joke that my name was Half a Job Haunts because I'd have all these wonderful ideas that I wanted to do, and I would just never get them completed. I mean, just like everyone else, I've got a GitHub account that's like a graveyard of abandoned projects. Most people are the same as that. So what is procrastination? So it is the habit of putting off or delaying, especially something requiring immediate attention. So we've all been there. Your boss has asked you to produce a report, or you've been given a particularly grotty task out of the Scrum backlog. It has to be done, but it's not particularly exciting. You're not inspired by this task whatsoever. So what do? Well, you might watch something on YouTube, or you might do something which is commonly referred to as procrasti working, where you do other tasks which make you look busy, but actually you're just delaying putting off what you're supposed to be doing. So I've done this before. I used to go off and just refactor code, which didn't really need refactoring, but I'd refactor it to make myself look busy and to think that I'm doing something meaningful, when actually I should have just been working on the real task. And then you delay that real task until right till the end, and then you get in a panic, you start feeling stressed, and then you rush out a half-assed job on that task. So what are the dangers of procrastination? Well, it stops you achieving your goals for a start, because you're constantly putting things off and delaying what you should be doing. It stops you from acting. So by having a level of procrastination where you might fear actually doing a job, it actually stops you from doing it. And taking those initial steps to completing a task or a piece of work can be quite hard. It stops you from challenging yourself, because you naturally over time start becoming more lazy towards your work, because you get into this habit of not doing things until the last minute. So then because you end up rushing, you don't actually end up challenging yourself, because you're constantly trying to play catch up with what you're supposed to be doing. And this in turn leads to high stress levels, and prolonged levels of stress over a long period of time is not good for you. It really is bad for you. So why do we procrastinate? Well, one of the biggest reasons is a fear of failure. And this is something that I found as well. So when I was a lot younger, in my 20s, maybe early 30s, when a new technology comes out or a new framework, you feel kind of energized and really keen to go and learn this new thing. What I found, and I don't know the general age group of people in the talk, but the older you get, when you have to learn new things, you kind of get a bit afraid of it. So now, Microsoft's come out with Blazor and Blazor WebAssembly and all these new fantastic things, and they're brilliant. But part of me thinks, oh, it's another thing to learn, and I'm getting a bit slower at this. And what if I screw it up? And you've got all these younger people coming in who are going to do a better job, and you kind of have this fear of failure. And everyone has a fear of failure to a certain degree, and it is quite common that fear can sort of get more amplified as we get older as well. Well, it certainly does for me. Procrastinators can tend to be perfectionists, where you have to feel like everything has to be absolutely perfect, or otherwise you're just not happy and you're not satisfied. But because you're worried that the work you're doing isn't going to be perfect, you might try and delay putting off doing it, because if it's not going to be perfect, why should I bother? It's kind of the general feeling. Low energy levels as well. I've certainly found this certainly over the last few months. Me and my wife are trying to homeschool 2 children. One of my kids has ADHD and autism, which makes schooling very, very difficult. And then while we're doing that, we're both still trying to do our day jobs as well. I have deadlines I have to achieve. My work is still in a full-time salaried job. So we're trying to, do everything in shifts and sort of share the workload of homeschooling. And by the end of the day, I know I've still got stuff to do for some deadlines, but you just feel absolutely exhausted by the time you get to the end of the day. And, that also leads to procrastination, because if you're tired, you think, oh, I can't be bothered, I'll just do it tomorrow. Which in turn leads to a lack of focus. And because if you're tired, if you've got a fear of failure, or you just feel as though you can't do something well enough to satisfy yourself, you just lose your focus completely. So procrastination can really be a really, really horrible trap that you can fall into. And I've been there. I've been in jobs before where I've been constantly playing catch up just because I haven't had the self-discipline to push myself into getting that work done. Okay, so some techniques for decreasing your chances of procrastination. So first of all, we need to accept that we're not perfect. And I'm going to talk about perfection as well when we start looking at social media. Is that sometimes we might look at other people that we work with, or other people on the internet, and so-called influencers and famous techie people, and they're writing articles and doing videos and speaking on YouTube and all that. And sometimes you might think to yourself, oh, well, I'm not as good as that person. But what you don't see is that actually behind the scenes, they've probably put in a huge amount of work to try and make themselves sound confident, when really they're just the same as us. They're not perfect. And sometimes you just need to accept that you're not perfect. You just need to try and do your best. You also need to understand that failure is not fatal. If you mess something up, the world isn't suddenly going to spin off its axis and crash into the sun. If you make a mistake on something and you do something wrong, okay, fine. What did you do wrong? Can you learn from it? Because most failures can be turned into a learning exercise where you learn from it and then you do better next time. Aim to do your best and be happy about the outputs. Doing this talk here, I mean, this is very weird. I can see now, looking at the screen, I've got 67 people listening. I can't see any of you, and it kind of feels a bit weird. And whilst I'm an experienced public speaker, actually doing this talk in front of a webcam right now is probably the most nervous I've been doing a talk. But, we are where we are, and I'm just going to be happy with how it turns out. And, hopefully it's going to be good. This one, try to develop a healthier lifestyle to get more energy. It goes back to you should be eating healthily and getting more exercise. Everyone goes on about how we should be healthier, but it is really true. I've certainly found during lockdown, because I've been forcing myself to go out and do walks every day, I've actually been the fittest I think I've probably ever been. well, certainly for the last 15 years. But if you're fitter and you're eating well and you're well hydrated, it makes your brain more alert and it makes you better at, just getting on with some work. And instead of being sort of tired and lethargic and putting that work off. Another one is going to bed earlier. Goes without saying, the more sleep you have, the more alert you're going to be in the morning. And also reducing screen time before bed. I mean, this is easier said than done, but having lots of, light blaring into your eyes before you go to sleep can generally lead to restless sleep. It then makes you tired and cranky in the morning. And then you think, oh, I can't be bothered to get this work done. Or if you can't reduce using the screen, I mean, a lot of devices now, I tend to use an iPad late at night. It has this like nighttime mode where it kind of takes a lot of the blue hints out of the screen so that it's not as glaring on your eyes. So even using things like that is quite good. So procrastination, it is a big problem. It's something that people need to recognize and, try and make a concerted effort to not put things off, try and get work done and started as soon as you physically can. Okay, so now I want to talk about controlling social media addiction. Now, as I mentioned before, I was massively addicted to Facebook. I'm going to talk about kind of different networks in a moment. And social media addiction is an addiction like anything else. I mean, alcohol can be addictive, smoking can be addictive, obviously drugs as well can be addictive. But social media can be just as addictive because, you post something, you're sitting there waiting for the likes and that can make you feel great. And just like where, if you have a glass of wine, kind of relaxes you a bit and makes you feel better. Strange. I mean, when you're out commuting, remember the days when we was allowed to commute? You'd sit on a train or a bus, and this is kind of the thing that you'd see quite commonly. People were just sitting there. Nobody's really having a conversation or engaging with each other, but everyone's sitting there on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. In my children's case, it's TikTok these days because that seems to be where all the cool people hang. It's kind of a real shame that we're losing this kind of real social interaction, but then just pushing all of our social interaction down onto a little screen, which is kind of a shame. So the way social media affects us, it affects us in different ways with different hormones and neurotransmitters. So I'm going to run through, I mean, I'm not a biologist by any stretch, but I'm going to talk about some of the different neurotransmitters and hormones and the way these things affect our brains. So the first one is dopamine. So this is a neurotransmitter that is used for reward, reinforcement and pleasure. So posting on social media and getting likes and having people, write nice comments makes you feel good. It elevates those dopamine levels in your brain. And because it makes you feel good and you get that nice little hit of happiness, you do it again and you do it again. And then after a while, it becomes addictive. So it is kind of a similar effect to drugs and alcohol. Someone takes drugs, they get that massive dopamine hit, or alcohol, it makes you feel relaxed and a bit happier, especially after you've had a particularly bad day. Obviously, I'm not condoning the use of drugs or alcohol, but the effects they have on you are they give you this hit of dopamine, which is exactly the same as posting on social media. Some quick fixes for getting dopamine hits, is to try and look for your rewards from elsewhere. So I find if I'm working on something, just completing a task, even a small task or a goal, and then physically ticking it off in my notepad, that kind of makes you feel good. And when you have larger pieces of work, it's kind of a good idea to break that work down into lots of smaller little tasks and then actually physically write them down. And now I've gone through pretty much every single productivity tool on the Mac and Windows that you can ever think of. I've actually gone back to using, a moleskin notebook and a pen, and I write my tasks down. And then when I've done it, I put a big physical tick next to it, and that kind of makes you feel good. Exercising and sightseeing. Exercise is proven to make you feel better. It gives you a good dopamine hit. So I tend to go out walking quite a lot. I live in rural Derbyshire, in the centre of England. So we have lots of hills and lots of nice countryside. So I tend to go out a lot and do lots of walking. And that makes me feel good when I do that. But also finishing a book. If you're reading a novel or a non-fiction book, just getting to the end of that book. I mean, that's an achievement and it makes you feel good. So next one is melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone and that governs your circadian rhythm, which is your sleep and wake cycle. This is why I was saying that if you use screens late at night, or if you're watching TV or using your laptop or a tablet or looking at your phone, the glare from that screen suppresses melatonin production, which then messes up your sort of sleeping cycles. So when you sleep, you go through a different cycle through the night. So you go through, your sort of lighter REM sleep, where you dream, and then you go into your deep sleep, which is where your body sort of does a lot of its restoration and sort of files all of your memories into long-term storage. If you don't have that melatonin produced at the right times, then it can mess up that cycle. And then when you wake up in the morning, you actually probably feel worse than when you did before you went to bed. So good ways of enhancing melatonin and regulating your circadian rhythms is getting some sunshine, so some actual outdoor sunlight. In the UK, we don't have a lot of that, although the past few weeks have been quite nice. But good sunshine outside is good for you. Avoiding screens late at night, or if you must use a screen, you try and put your nighttime mode on. A warm bath or a shower before bed really helps relax you and just helps you get to sleep. And also reading before bed, ideally on something like a Kindle or an actual physical paper book. Okay, so the next one is oxytocin. So oxytocin is a transmitter that affects social interaction, sexual chemistry, and bonding between family and friends. So oxytocin levels in our bodies increase with physical social interactions. So, hanging out with your family, friends, hugging, kissing, that sort of thing. Although obviously with social distancing, a lot of those things are quite hard at the moment. Now, virtual interactions do increase oxytocin levels, but it's only slightly. It's nothing like the real thing. Which is like, one of the reasons I love going to actual, like in-person conferences is, on one hand, you've got all the fantastic talks and the content, but you're there interacting with people. You're shaking hands with people or giving your friends a hug and just having conversations, and that's great. And that's what helps release oxytocin into your brain. So quick fixes for that is, making sure that, if you do spend a lot of time in front of a computer, like we all do, is spend more time with family and friends in the real world, actually doing real things as and when we can. Playing with your children. So one thing I found when I was working from home full time, because all of my work equipment was in easy reach, you started getting to the point where, the kids will come home from school and, I'm supposed to be playing with my children. That's why we have children. We want to play with them. But then you think, well, I've got this task which I didn't quite finish. And then you kind of feel stressed because you haven't got this thing finished and it's right there. But you should be playing with your kids. And you kind of get into this kind of trap. But, playing with children, having real conversations and physical contact with people is a good way of regulating your oxytocin levels. And then finally, we have serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter which contributes to the feeling of happiness and well-being. So high levels of this boost your mood. They make you feel happy and energetic. And low levels of serotonin are linked with sort of depression, some mental health conditions, and general lethargy as well, where you just feel too tired and you just can't be bothered to do something that you should be doing. So low levels of serotonin can sort of cause negative thoughts in your mind. It can make you irritable. It can make you anxious. So generally, it's not a nice position to be in if your serotonin levels are out of balance. And something I found with social media, which can affect your serotonin production, is that it can really affect your self-worth, and it creates a culture of envy and inadequacy, I mean, how many times do you go onto things like Instagram where people are posting all the wonderful things in their life, whether they're real or whether they're just fake and posed? Nobody ever really posts the bad stuff that happens. The fact that the kids have woken you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you look like a cat that's been dragged through a hedge when you wake up. Nobody posts that stuff. They just post the really good stuff. So if you're just constantly scrolling through your Instagram feed and you're just bombarded with everyone's happy, wonderful life, yet you know that you're struggling at the moment, it can really affect your self-worth, and it's really quite dangerous, I think. Again, things that can help regulate your serotonin levels is exercise and sunshine at the same time is even better. Just trying to physically make sure you maintain a positive outlook, doing affirmations every day where you sort of physically tell yourself that, you are doing a good job, what you're doing is worthwhile, and, you should keep on doing the good things that you do. Be positive. The glass is half full, it's not half empty. So a while ago, I wrote an article, which kind of feels odd quoting myself. So it's an article called How Being Connected Disconnects Social Media, Depression and Your Brain. There's a bit I wanted to quote from it, which kind of links back to the slides that we've just looked at. So social media is dangerous because it rewards you for posting and getting likes, which is dopamine. It makes you feel artificially connected, which affects your oxytocin levels, even if you are isolated deep inside. And it makes you feel bad about yourself, which is serotonin, as you vicariously live the life of your friends. So you look at everyone's feeds and you see all their photos and you end up not living your life as much, but you tend to care more about what other people are doing, which I think is really bad. And, I've already mentioned this, but, people very rarely post the bad things that are going on. They always post the good. So if you're at a point in your life where you're struggling, and, we've all been through this. I mean, pretty much the entire planet has been through lockdown over the last few months. And, I've struggled with it. I'm not going to lie. I've found lockdown incredibly hard and stressful and anxious, along with my wife, trying to homeschool children, do jobs. We're absolutely exhausted, not having the best of times. Yet you still see people posting amazing things on Instagram, and it's got to a point where you just stop looking, I think is the best thing to do. Okay, so one thing I'm not saying is, you shouldn't just give up all social media. It's like those fad diets that people try to get you to go on. You might lose a bit of weight initially, but then you'll put it all straight back on, even worse. So I'm not saying you should give up social media. Social media is a fantastic tool, and it does allow us to be connected, but it does need controlling. So I'm going to talk about kind of what I did personally, and then maybe you might want to translate some of that to how you work with social media. So these are the networks I use. Now, I know there's hundreds of social networks, and I wouldn't even know where to start on something like TikTok, and quite frankly, I'm not going to bother. But for me personally, for my business life, I tend to use Twitter and LinkedIn for that. Twitter is a way of engaging with my audience. You watch my courses, I can let them know when new stuff happens. LinkedIn, kind of everyone has a LinkedIn account. I don't really use LinkedIn that often. It's never really been a problem. I might check it once a week, but it's not really an issue. Facebook used to be my biggest problem, which I'll go on to in a moment, but I had a ridiculous amount of so-called friends on Facebook, and I just spent all my time on it, as well as being connected to hundreds of different groups which I was following. And to a lesser degree, Instagram. I mean, I've never classed myself as being addicted to Instagram. I probably check it 3 or 4 times a week. But, like I was saying before, Instagram seems to be the place where people post all of their amazing things. And, it can, if you're struggling and having a bad day, Instagram can be quite a difficult thing to grapple with. So, Facebook. So, at one point, I had 750 so-called friends on there, which is quite ridiculous because I'm pretty sure I don't know 750 people. But, as you meet people at conferences and you end up connecting and all that sort of stuff, it kind of builds up. So I went through a process last year, about last August or September time, I think it was, where I pruned Facebook down considerably. So now I'm down to about 50. I used a simple criteria for doing that, and I call it the do you stay or do you go process. So first of all, are you family and close friends? Close friends as in people that I would go to the pub with or go out for a coffee with and see in real life. So if you was in that category, naturally you stay. I'm not going to, cut off my family and my close friends. I think that's kind of the best thing for Facebook, is having your family and close friends on there. So they stayed. So are you an old coworker that I actually like? Now, I had hundreds of old coworkers on there. And I'm not saying I didn't like them. You know, I got on with pretty much all of my coworkers over the last 25 years. But it's probably only 4 or 5 that I actually regularly see, and we'll go out for coffee or go out for lunch with, or maybe go to the pub. And the rest, I never engage with them. I'm not particularly that interested in what they're up to at the moment, just as they're probably not really interested in what I'm doing. So I removed a whole huge swath of old co-workers, and it's not anything personal. I'm not saying I don't like them. It's just I had to kind of reduce the amount of people on Facebook to reduce the noise. Because when you have 750 friends, Facebook tries to predict what they think you want to see, and you end up with a really bizarre timeline. So the next one is, if I was to see you on the street, would I try and hide? And it sounds a bit weird, but I'm sure we've all been down this situation before, where you see someone walking down the street and you think, oh, I really don't really want to talk to you at the moment. So you might hide behind post box, or quickly run into a shop just so you don't have to have a conversation with someone. So if I felt kind of that way about someone on there, then I just removed them. And then once I got to that, I'd reduced my list by quite a lot. But then I had one last final measure which I used. So is someone a really persistent complainer, or are they just overly political? Now by that I mean, everyone has a little vent about politics at some point in life. I'm not going to make this talk about politics anyway, but sometimes your government might do something a bit silly. I mean, my government does that all the time, it seems. And every now and again, you might have a little whinge on Facebook. That's fine. I haven't got a problem with that. But I had some people on there who are just going on about politics constantly, and it really does drag you down. I mean, I'm from the UK, so we've had the whole Brexit thing going on. And you get some people who just talk about it constantly, and it just makes you depressed. I've got friends who live in Europe, and all they do is they talk about Donald Trump. It's not even their president, but they just constantly talk about Trump. And after a while, you just don't want to see it anymore. I had a load of people that are just always negative. Nothing's ever good. They always find something to complain about. And I haven't got time for that. So people that fall into that category, and I had about 30 people that fell into that category, I just removed them, because it's not healthy to be constantly bombarded with that level of people complaining. So that's how I tamed Facebook. So I went from 750 so-called friends down to 50 people that are family and close friends, people that I do actually see in real life. And it was good, because it means Facebook actually has a much better chance of trying to put together a timeline which it thinks you want to see. Now, I don't check Facebook that often. I probably go in a few times a week, but when I go in there, it's like, I can see what my cousins are doing, or my aunts and uncles are doing, or my, my dad or my brother. It's a much nicer environment. Twitter. Now, Twitter's an interesting one. One word I can use for Twitter is the toxic dumpster fire of hate. I don't think I've ever used a social network where there is so much hate concentrated in one place, and it's horrible. Sometimes I find that people can just post on Twitter and think there's absolutely no consequence of what they're posting, and it can be quite a depressing place sometimes. So I had to do something about Twitter. Now, I couldn't just get rid of it, because it's kind of one of the ways I use to engage with people that watch my courses or read my books and stuff. So I need to use it as a tool, but I had to control it. Now, I mainly use Twitter for notifying people of stuff that I've done. I occasionally post silly videos. I very rarely have deep conversations on there. I do have conversations. If I had someone recently who had watched my Agile Fundamentals course on Pluralsight, and they posted a message and sort of tagged me in on it, saying about how that course helped them pass their Scrum Master certification, which was fantastic. So naturally, I was going to, I replied to them, and I was like, oh, that's, congratulations, and thank you very much for watching. So I do have conversations on there, but I'm never going to have a really long conversation on Twitter. And the first thing I did was I just removed people that I was following that I didn't know. Because, like with Facebook, you go to lots of events, and before, COVID, I used to travel all around the world speaking at conferences, teaching workshops. You end up just, connecting with people on Twitter. And I had thousands, and I think I was following something like 3,500 people on Twitter. Again, which meant timeline that I was presented with, I didn't know majority of the people on there. So I reduced that down considerably by only following people that I actually know, Or, I've got celebrities on there, I've got book authors on there that, I'm interested in what they're doing. Another thing I did is started making use of lists. Now, I'm probably the last person on the world that's ever used lists on Twitter. I didn't really ever think of using them, but lists are brilliant because you can put people into different categories. So I have a list for celebrities that I follow. I am interested in what Dwayne the Rock Johnson's up to because I'm a big fan of his movies. I've got another list for book authors that I can just go into. I've got a list for all my speaker friends that I sort of see around the world. I've got a software development list of sort of known, sort of well-known software developers. So a lot of the time when I go into Twitter, instead of looking at the main timeline, I'll just go in and look at an individual list. And that makes the amount of information that you're bombarded with much more refined, which is pretty cool. And I also use some tools to help make Twitter work for me. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But something I've actually started using recently, which I didn't actually know about, it was Dylan Beattie that told me about it, is that on Twitter, you can block keywords. Again, I didn't know about it, but Dylan mentioned it to me and he showed me how to do it. And this is great because certain keywords seem to attract very negative and abusive conversations on Twitter. So you can actually go in and just mute them so you don't get shown any posts that have things in that you don't want to know about. After years and years of Brexit stuff going on in the UK, I was kind of sick of hearing about it. So I blocked keywords to do with Brexit and withdrawal agreements and various different politicians. Just don't want to see it, so I blocked the keywords. A lot of stuff that you can block, like racist keywords as well. So you just don't see a lot of the hate or misogyny which comes up on Twitter a lot. So I really do think you should look at using keyword muting as well. So if it's something that you particularly really do not want to see come up in your timeline, you can sort of mute all the various keywords around it, which is pretty cool. Different tools that you can use. So I started using a tool called Later, which is what this effectively does. It gives you like kind of like an Outlook calendar style view. So if I'm wanting to do some promotion around some of the stuff that I've been doing, you can kind of schedule when tweets are going to go out. So, I've got a course coming out on this date. I can post a series of tweets and have it all scheduled and it will just handle posting them for you, which is quite cool. Buffer is a fantastic tool. So you can set up posting schedules. So if you see a really cool article on something, you can just say post to Buffer and then Buffer might, push that out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it just kind of helps you spread when things are being posted, which is quite nice. Instagram, so I've never really had a problem with Instagram, apart from the fact that obviously you do get bombarded with overly positive stuff all the time, which can make you feel a bit bad. But I never felt that I was ever addicted to it. So I didn't really feel I had to do anything to under control. And the same with LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn profile. It's kind of my online CV. I might go in once or twice a week, just have a look, see what people are saying and doing. But I never had a problem with it, so I didn't really have to do any kind of corrective stuff for it. One thing I have done is I've removed social media from my phone, which is a big thing to do because you kind of get this muscle memory where you just pull your phone out of your pocket and you just want to go searching for stuff on social media, and that can be quite destructive and time consuming. So I just removed it from my phone, which makes a massive difference. You do spend a bit of time constantly going, because through habit, you keep on trying to pull the phone out, but you kind of lose that habit after a while. Something that does bring me quite a lot of concern is, I have 2 young children. These aren't my kids. This is just a stock photo. But, I have 2 young kids, a daughter and a son. And they're at the age where they're kind of getting into using the internet and learning how to use technology. So me and my wife kind of had to start thinking about how we control the use of technology in the internet with the children. So one thing we implemented was a bit of a sort of a brute force ban hammer on the router. So our router has parental controls. You can control when the kids are going to use the internet, which is quite good. So we can turn it off between certain times. So typically pre-lockdown, we'd say, they can't use the internet until they've got up, got ready for school, brushed their teeth, done half an hour's reading. Then I'll switch the internet on. In the evening, they had to do their homework. They had to read for half an hour and make sure their room's tidy. Once they've done those, I'll put the internet back on. Now, lockdown, we've not really followed that as much. So if the kids want to use the internet, we make them, do their work. So my wife does the morning lessons. I do the afternoon lessons with them. and they have to do well in those lessons before we let them use the internet. But I will put my hands up and say, because me and my wife have to work as well. Once they've done the lessons, we just give them their phones because we need to concentrate, which I think is kind of a common story with a lot of people. How are we doing for time? Okay, I need to get a wiggle on a bit. Okay, so self-motivation. So a lack of motivation is something that most people experience at some point in their lives. And by this, I mean, you just sit there in the morning, you've got some tasks to do, but you just really don't feel like it. You're not motivated. And there's different types of motivation. So we've got intrinsic motivation, and this is where you have an internal desire that motivates you. So you might have goals that you want to pursue and you feel like you want to achieve those goals. And you have this inner drive to succeed. But you also have what's called extrinsic motivation. And this comes from an external source, such as your boss telling you that you need to be more productive. So you may not feel intrinsically motivated to do a task, but you have an external factor kind of chipping away at you saying, no, you have to do this. You have to do this piece of freelance work, otherwise you won't get paid. That's an extrinsic motivation. But also when we talk about motivation, there's something called the locus of control, which is something that I became aware of last year. And it's quite an interesting concept. So the locus of control is the capacity to which you believe you have complete control and power over what happens in your life. And you can think of the locus of control as kind of on a spectrum. So you have your external locus of control and your internal. Now, one person doesn't live at any one point permanently on that spectrum. You can kind of move kind of in between. But an external locus of control is where you think that your achievements are outside of your control. They're determined by fate and they're independent of your hard work or decisions. So, for example, you might think, yeah, I completed this really complex task, but it wasn't just me. It's because Bob helped me with this and Sarah helped me with that, and it was them that helped me achieve it. So you're not giving yourself the credit for doing that work. You're attributing it to something else. There's your internal locus of control is where you think your achievements are within your control, determined by your hard work or decisions. So you might be, I completed this work because I worked bloody hard to do it. And it was hard. I had to research a load of stuff. I had to learn some stuff. I had to read some books and read articles, but it was all down to me. And I think, having an internal locus of control where you believe that everything you do is kind of down to how you behave and how you act is kind of healthy or healthier, whereas an external locus of control is where you're not really giving yourself the credit for the work that you do. And we can flip between the two quite commonly. And another way of thinking about this as well is that it's about worrying about what you can personally control day to day. So there's some things that you can control. There's some things that you can't control. So some examples, things that you can't control. So you can't control time. Time is one constant we can't control. Time constantly marches forward. There's nothing we can do about it. You generally can't control what other people think of you. People will form opinions of you no matter whether you like it or not. And generally that's outside of your control. So should you worry necessarily about what other people think of you? I mean, it's very easy to say, no, you shouldn't. But obviously, naturally, as humans, we do worry about that. The weather is something that generally we can't control. In the UK, over the last few months, we've actually had some of the best. We've had the best spring I think we've ever had, which has been fantastic. And the last week has just been wet and miserable. We can't control the weather. But things you can control. So if you have a deadline for a piece of work, that is totally within your control. Now, if you're a procrastinator, you're probably going to delay doing that work until the day before and then panic and be stressed and do a bad job. But you are completely in control of that deadline. If you've got 2 weeks to do some work, use the 2 weeks. You're in control of that. Your weight and, playing, sorry, do the next one. Your children, if you're a parent, playing with your children is something that is completely within your control. The happiness of your children is in your control. Children don't generally want much. I mean, they say they want the latest iPhone and a tablet, but really what a lot of children want is attention. They want you to be present and do stuff with them. That is within your control. Weight, fitness, and your health is kind of something that's in your control. You can either choose not to do anything and be unhealthy, or you can choose to do something about it and start eating better, sleeping better, drinking more water, taking more exercise. That is within your control. Who you follow on social media is totally within your control. in my previous examples, I showed how it kind of went out of control, and I was, 750 friends on Facebook is an example of that going out of control. But I took control of that situation. It's something that I could do because I chose to do it. So that's kind of a key message, and you should only worry about or try to worry about things that you can control. If you can't control something and it's completely without your control to actually do anything about it, try not to worry so much about it, because you can't do anything about it, so why worry about it? Okay, so I want to sort of round out this last section by talking about some general focus, productivity, and time management tips. Now, some of these are going to be completely obvious, and you're going to think, well, why are you talking about that? That's obvious. But it might not necessarily be obvious to everyone. And some of them might be some more techniques which you've maybe not used before. Maybe you might be interested in using them. So the first one is stay hydrated. Just as I was about to take a sip of water. Now, everyone says, oh, you should drink plenty of water and it's a good thing to do. But it is a really good thing to do because it helps keep you alert. So every morning when I wake up now, one of the first things I do is I go and drink a glass of water. Not a massive glass of water, but I'll drink a glass of water because it really helps wake your mind up, wake up your brain, and helps you be more alert in the morning. It'll help you keep you alert during the day as well. So if you're feeling very lethargic in the afternoon, sometimes you might just go to the coffee machine to get some caffeine, which is kind of an artificial stimulus to make us feel alert. But if you're sipping water throughout the day, that's probably more effective at keeping you alert than what having a caffeine hit's going to be. I'm not saying coffee's bad. I love coffee. But, drink plenty of water as well. If you're going to drink a large coffee, have a glass of water at the same time. Again, getting plenty of sleep is a key thing for keeping you alert. I'm not going to cover this too much because we've talked about it previously, but I wanted to show you a picture of a sleeping puppy. But sleep is very important. Try and get more of it. Go to bed earlier. Again, not going to dwell too much on this one. Taking regular exercise, again, is a great way of keeping those neurotransmitters and hormones balanced in your brain. A lot of people say that when they go out and do some exercise, or they go to the gym or go for a run, that it kind of makes them feel great, really pumped about the day. Maybe go for a brisk walk in the morning. You don't have to go far, just, around the block. It can really kind of help set you up for the rest of the day. Goal setting is another thing that's really important. And I'm not just talking about long-term goals, like, what you want to achieve by the end of the year. Small goals are really important. So every day I write down what I want to achieve that day. Today I wrote down that I want to talk at NDC Oslo and try and give you a really good, engaging talk that I hope you'll all agree. But I've also got other things that I need to do today as well. And your goal list will always generally tend to turn into a to-do list for that day. But just writing down what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it is a great way for priming your mind to take action during the day. Writing down your plan in some form or another. I mean, as I said before, I've used pretty much every single productivity tool under the sun, and they're all fantastic. But I've actually gone back to using a Moleskine notebook and a pen. Doesn't matter what you use. I mean, if you want to use like Todoist or OmniFocus or whatever apps are out there, that's fine. But actually physically writing down or typing down your plan and then ticking things off as you go is a great way of, well, for a start, motivating you when you complete tasks, but also telling you what's next. You don't have to think too much about what comes next. You've got it written down and planned. Something I started doing, prior to lockdown, before things were chaotic, but actually blocking out time in your calendar. Especially if you work in an organization where people try to book meetings, something I used to do when I was still employed is between 10 and 12 in the morning and 2 and 4 in the afternoon. I used to block those out so people couldn't book meetings over them. They were my 4 hours focused productive time. I would close my email, I'd switch off my phone, I'd put my headphones on, and by damn it, I was going to work like nothing. I was going to work really hard in those 4 hours. Then meetings could be on the outside of that, but you get 4 hours pure, hard, focused work time during the day. That's something I still try to do now, is like, between those hours, I try to focus. Make sure you reward yourself for hitting goals as well. So as you complete things throughout the day and you achieve the things that you want to do, reward yourself. Go get yourself a nice latte or a coffee or a can of Coke, whatever you like to do. If you achieve all your goals before lunchtime, go out for a walk. Reward yourself. It's It's kind of like, when you see on these science things where you have like, rats running around a little maze doing tasks, and then they get rewarded for doing the tasks, which means they do the tasks again, and it kind of primes their brains to succeed because they know they're going to get a reward. We're exactly the same as people. Something I use, and this is kind of one of my secret weapons of how I'm productive, is I do lots and lots and lots of outlining for like written tasks. And a written task could be a small report, it could be, a blog post you're doing, it could be a book. And I've had people say to me before, how do you release so many Pluralsight courses? Because when you write a Pluralsight course, for example, you write a script. An hour and a half course is going to be about a 25,000 word script, which is, an 80 or 90 page book, if you think about it. Well, the way I manage to do that consistently is I outline everything. So I start off with my main subheadings, which tend to be your chapters or modules. You then do your subheadings. You then do subheadings under that, which talks about exactly the points that you're going to talk about and the point you're trying to get across. Then you do all your research and you start pasting your research under all the different headings. By the time you've gone 3 or 4 levels deep in headings, you've got a really extensive outline and you know exactly what you're saying, what your points are you're trying to make, the facts, references to where you're getting your information from, your opinions and thoughts is all mapped out. That's the hard bit. Once you've done that, actually filling the rest in with just, writing it out is actually easy once you've got that plan in front of you. So outlining is a hugely, hugely beneficial task. And not that many people talk about it. But outlining anything, whether it's a blog post, an article, book, or whatever it is you're trying to do, it's a great way of breaking that work down into smaller pieces. And by the time you've done the outline, you have done the hard work already, which is great. This one obviously is quite common, but if you're given a large task, so say you're given a ticket during your Scrum process, and it's a really big piece of work, maybe I don't know, implementing an authentication provider or adding support for Cosmos DB on Azure, quite a big task. Big tasks can be threatening and intimidating and make you anxious. If you break it down into lots and lots of small pieces, then you're actually going to be more motivated to complete those tasks. So for example, if I was working on a new project, I'd have a task which is file new, create solution, file new, create solution for the unit test projects. Check those into GitHub. Just that one simple task of doing the file new and then checking them in makes you feel good when you've completed it. So that's one small piece of a larger puzzle. Okay, well, what's the next bit? Well, I'm going to add this class in for doing this. So you add an empty class in with a few methods that may have throw new not implemented exception. Okay, well, we kind of mapped out what this thing's going to look like. Okay, right, let's check that in. That's another task done. And as you gradually iterate, before you know it, this big, huge, intimidating, threatening task, you've actually achieved it fairly easily just by breaking things down into smaller steps. If you break something down and you still feel threatened by it, break it down even more. There's absolutely no shame in doing that. Focused and time work sprints. So, a lot of people commonly work with things like Scrum or other methodologies. And one of the things they promote is working in focused sprints, like using the Pomodoro technique. This is a great technique. I use it quite a bit. I don't have a fancy tomato timer like that. I use a little app on my computer where I set, say, a 20-minute sprint, work furiously during that 20 minutes, and a little alarm goes off, and then I'll take a 5-minute break. But those little focused work sprints are really good for getting your brain just to zero in on a task that has to be done. Batching similar tasks together is a fantastic technique. As an example, I run a business, so one of the parts of running a business is you have to do finances and accounting and all that really boring, tedious stuff. So I batch all those tasks together. For me, Friday afternoon is normally company accounts time. So if I've got receipts to file and scan, and I've got to tag transactions in Xero and do things like that, I'll just batch all the tasks together. I have a little entry in my notepad where I write down, and I wait until that Friday afternoon, and I'll do all those tasks in one go, because then my mind is in, right, now is company finance time. It's the same with, with software development. You might have a load of development tasks and a load of, say, documentation tasks. Well, maybe batch documentation tasks together, because then your mind is in kind of documentation writing mode. And because if you don't batch things together, you're constantly context switching between classes. And context switching is expensive, both in computing terms and in your mind. You're constantly having to rethink about what you're doing. So you batch things together, get your mind into a mindset, and then focus on those batches of tasks. I find it really helps to perform dreaded tasks in the morning. So the stuff that if you're given a task and you just sit there thinking, oh, I really don't want to do that. For me, I tend to prioritize those earlier in the day. I used to be a night person and not a morning person, but after nearly 20 years of marriage, my wife has pretty much trained me to being a go to bed earlier person and wake up at 6 a.m. person. So now I find that, especially during lockdown, is we get up at 6. Me and my wife both start work at 7 a.m. at the moment. We work from 7 till 9. In that time period, I try and get all of the crap tasks done that I've got for my job. Then we do homeschooling, and then we kind of do the scheduling as we go during the day. But I know that if I've got some less nice tasks that I need to do for my day job work, I'll try and get them done early in the morning and save some of the more rewarding fun tasks in the afternoon. So if I'm feeling tired, or the kids have been putting up a lot of resistance to learning and I'm in a bad mood, I know that I've got some of the fun tasks in the afternoon, but I know that I've got the kind of the grotty, horrible tasks out the way in the morning. How are we doing for time? Okay, 4 minutes. Declaring regular email bankruptcy. I am rubbish at email. Regularly, if you look at my inbox, I just have thousands of unread messages. So I generally tend to skim read the headings, and if it's just something I'm not interested in, I don't read it. I do respond to people, so if someone writes me something directly, I do respond, but I am rubbish at email. And every now and again, probably once a quarter, I declare email bankruptcy. I set up an archive folder, I copy everything that's unread into it, and I say, right click, read. If it's really important, someone's going to get back to me and ask me again. But it just helps get you to inbox zero, the cheating way, which is good. I use some focused apps. I use one on the Mac called Focus. So if I'm really trying to knuckle down and get something done, you trigger this app. And what it does is you set time windows on it. And during those time windows, it will not let you use things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. So if you try and go to those websites, it just pops up a little inspirational quote. This is quite good, especially if you know that you're the sort of person that might just suddenly jump down a YouTube rabbit hole when you're supposed to be working. A tool like this can really help you. And there's even a setting on there which doesn't let you override it as an admin. So you have to wait until the time window ends, which is quite useful. Listening to music. Sorry, not listening to music. So I can see my next slide down here. Hold on. Removing social media from your phone, again, is something that I found really useful, because you tend to have that muscle memory where you grab your phone and try and just look at Twitter. So I've managed to train myself not to do that. Listening to music is something that is really good for helping you focus. There's been several studies around this, so you can look these up. So one, which was in Implied Ergonomics in 1972, says those doing repetitive tasks work more efficiently when there's background music. The Journal of American Medical Association in 72 said surgeons are more accurate and efficient when they operate with background music, which is kind of interesting. I hope they're listening to calm classical music as opposed to putting on Rammstein's latest album. I'd be a bit worried if I was going for an operation and suddenly Du Hast or something like that came on the radio. The Neuroscience and Behavior Physiology group in 1999 said a study conducted to correlate the number of identification of classical or rock music concluded that participants were able to identify numbers faster and with more accuracy whilst listening to music. It's quite interesting. And the Journal of Psychology of Music in 2005 said music is proven to aid in positive moods, better quality of work, and improved efficiency. So I completely agree with this. I love music. For me personally, when I'm working, I find it hard to work if I'm listening to songs that have got vocals and lyrics. So typically what I tend to do is I listen to a lot of movie soundtracks. I love the scores to films. So that's kind of what I listen to when I'm working. Another type of app I use, this one's called Noisily, which is really good. It just lets you play ambient sounds in your headphones while you're working. So you can have birds chirping in a park or a nice sort of crackle of a campfire, which is quite nice. And those really help. And the last one, again, which is a bit of a weird one to talk about in lockdown, but trying for a change of scenery really helps. So I used to go to coffee shops quite a lot, or every now and again, sometimes I'll just book a couple of days in a co-working space in a city nearby and just go there just for a bit of a change of scenery and just to meet some new people. Sometimes, if you're in the same place all the time, you can kind of get into a bit of a rut. So it can be good to just go out somewhere new and see some new faces. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. We talked quite a bit about procrastination and the dangers of procrastination. We talked a bit about how social media can be a massive distraction and how I personally overcame social media addiction, specifically with Facebook. Again, how we educate and bring up our children to appreciate technology is something that I've worried about quite a lot. It is very difficult to be addicted to social media and then expect your kids not to be. So you have to kind of think as parents about how you bring our children up to be better at doing this sort of stuff. And we also talked a bit about motivations and self-motivation. So, I go back to what we said before. So it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It really is. We have unbelievable technology, but that technology can also be a bit of a curse. And it's trying to remove that curse and make technology work for us, as opposed to it controlling us, which is kind of the important thing. So, you always need to remember that time is running out. As we said before, time is the one constant that you can't control. So you need to be cognizant about how you make the best use of your time. You're only on this planet for a short time, and you want to make sure that your time counts and that you're not wasting the time. So if you're interested in some of these things, I've got some resources here that you might like. So I've got a book called A Gentle Introduction to Beating Procrastination and Getting Focused. Or if you're a Pluralsight subscriber, I have kind of the similar thing as a book on Pluralsights called Increasing Productivity by Beating Procrastination. It's kind of a course that's designed to kind of help you kick the habit. Also released a book late last year called The Art of Conversation, which is about how to communicate effectively and refine your social skills, which is something that some of us tend to struggle with in our line of work. But this is about how to be a better communicator and sort of strike up conversations with people. So I'm 2 minutes over. So with that, I would just like to say thank you very much for coming along to this talk. It's brilliant to see so many people attending, and I can see that I've got 73 people in this talk, which is absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much for coming to see my talk. If you want to follow me, you can on Twitter, or the Dumpster Fire of Hate, as we called it. So I'm at Stephen Haunts on there. And also have a blog, www.stephenhaunts.com. So because we are over time, it's going to be difficult to do questions, but what I will do is I'll stick around for a bit. And if you go to conference room 6, in Slack, if you ask me any questions there, I'll try and answer them. Or if you have anything that's a bit more personal that you don't want to ask in front of everyone, then you can just ping me a message privately on Slack and I'll do my best to try and answer that. I believe NDC is doing some kind of rating system, although it's not very scientific, but I think in the Slack, if you can leave a green tick somewhere, I believe you can do. I don't know how you do that or where you do that. I think you can do a green tick if you liked it, a yellow tick if you thought it was okay, and a red tick if you didn't like it. I'm pretty sure the yellow and red ticks don't work, so I think only the green one works. But with that, thank you very much, and I hope you have a fantastic 3 days at the conference. I've had a good look at the agenda, and you've got some absolutely unbelievable talks coming up. So thank you very much, and I shall speak to you around. I'll be in the hallway track on Slack, and with that, thank you very much.